Hey, what's up? I'm David Yak here, and you're listening to Yak About Today. So I've been thinking about going south for the winter. So you all probably think I mean Florida, but since I am broadcasting from Florida, I mean further south. So I've always wanted to see the land of Darwin, the Galapagos Islands where nature stands still, Machu Picchu, Peru, Ecuador. So I decided to take a little internet trip down there and get a hold of Marcel Perkins in Quito, Ecuador, to take us along for the ride. So that's what we'll yak about today. What's up, everybody? David Yak here for Yak About Today, hoping you are better, healthier, and more informed than any generation that came before. So if the years 46 to 64 mean something to you, then this is the place you want to be. Now put your headphones on, go for a run, and listen to what we yak about today. And we're back. I'm David Yak here. You're listening to Yak About Today. And as promised, I've got Marcel Perkins here from Latin Trails. And Marcel, I want to welcome you.
Hi, David. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Okay. So the reason we're talking is that I have an audience mostly made up of the wiser and more mature that do a lot of traveling, right? And I often get emails and texts asking me why I never cover like vacations and travel, because we we cover everything else. We cover health and finances and psychology and all that. But actually, I never really thought about it before, but I started getting requests, can you get us information about traveling? Because the audience really does a lot of traveling, especially as they've gotten older and they have the means, and some of them are retired. They really want to go around the world. And what I really thought was interesting is having a starting point like South America, and I thought that's why it was great to talk to you. So let's do two things right up front. Tell us a little about yourself, right? How you got into what you're doing, and then tell us about Latin Trails.
Wonderful. Well, about myself, I'm a U.S. expat that lives in Quito, Ecuador. How did I get to Quito, Ecuador? Well, when I was 16 years old, my parents decided to finally move to Ecuador because we were going back and forth all the time. My mother is Ecuadorian. I was born in New Jersey. When we moved to Ecuador, I was introduced not only to a different culture, a different country, but taken around all of South America, as my mother and my father wanted us to see all our surroundings and explore as much as we could. At the same time, I was also introduced into the travel industry in a very sideways, if you want to look at it that way, because we started working with different doctors, because my parents come from the medical field. Doctors Without Borders and other NGOs, and we organized all the logistics for the trips in the region. We also organized the trips for some of their friends in the medical field as well. And this was more as a side business for them, or if anything. But eventually, when I graduated from university, I decided to go into the travel industry, and that's how I formed Latin Trails. Most of my life, I've been living both between the East Coast of the United States and in Quito, Ecuador, which is where I am based now. At the time, I'm 45 years old. I have an Ecuadorian wife and 3 lovely kids.
All right. So it is, I'm also interested because my parents also went into travel. I mean, they're no longer with us, but when I was young, they went into travel, except back then their big experiences for the customers was Florida. So I remember, sitting in the travel agencies and reading all the brochures and all that. Is there a specialty that Latin Trails, you specialize obviously in a couple of countries? I think I read that it was Ecuador and Peru. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. We specialize in Ecuador and in Peru. Most of our trips are considered adventure travel. not because they're extremely active. Actually, our average guest is 54 years old. We have guests that are younger at heart and reach up to their 90s, but it's more an adventurous trip for the mind than anything, because you're going out of context. Now, I relate to what you say, most trips are to Florida. Well, you have to understand also that, the United States is such a big country geographically. So coming down to South America, we're only 3.5 hours actually from Florida to Quito, Ecuador. So it's really not that far away.
Hop, skip, and a jump.
Hop, skip, and a jump. Absolutely. Now, it's about having your mindset and being open to seeing a different culture, to seeing different nature and a different lifestyle. And of course, with that comes different food, different types of hotels, and very unique things you can't find anywhere else on the planet. And that's what really makes travel interesting, because you're out to see something different. If you want to look at it as travel, beyond just a vacation where you go and sit at a beach lodge or at a mountain lodge, but really exploring and going outside of your comfort zone a little bit.
So I have a question here. So most travel agents, as far as I know, what you do is say, look, I want to go to Quito, where you are right now, and they'll book your flight and they'll book a hotel and what do they call it? Transfer services or something like that, where
exactly
there's somebody picks you up in a car and takes you to the hotel and back, and maybe the hotel includes a meal type of thing. But I have a feeling you offer something different. You offer itineraries that take travelers through the experience. Is that true?
Yes, and we work a lot with travel agents because we help them plan the entire trip for their clients. We work a lot of, actually 80% of our business is on a business-to-business basis, organizing trips for the clients of travel agents from around the globe, for one part. So what we do is basically we create travel itineraries based on the interest of the person visiting, on our guests. And we add experiences in there based on their life preferences. So a lot of times we get actually people that tell us, look, I live in a house that's, that we like things that are modern. So that way I actually select a hotel based on their lifestyle preferences. And then if they are interested in food, we will add in a small cooking class to part of one of the city tours, and then we'll show them around the entire country, creating these unique experiences, but also putting together a full itinerary so they have a worry-free 1 week or 2 week vacation where everything has been set and planned, well, of course, with free time in between, but so that they don't have to worry about, booking anything additional or going, or finding an activity to do once they're here. They actually have everything organized. And in our case, we also offer them the part in the Galapagos Islands where we have 2 small yachts for 16 guests each. These are pretty much upmarket boats, but they allow guests to travel around the different islands of the Galapagos archipelago, and which is probably the most difficult but most interesting part of the trip, in the sense that to visit the Galapagos Islands without an organized trip, it's quite it limits you a lot to mainly populated areas, or if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, of course, when we think, and actually this is a two-sided question, when we think of going down to Ecuador or Peru, I mean, the only 2 things that people actually know, that they recite, I'm going down, they say, I'm going to Machu Picchu and I'm going to the Galapagos Islands, and that seems to be the itinerary that most people go down there. But there must be much more to the culture of Ecuador and Peru, than just going to the Galapagos Islands. And then the reason I was thinking of the islands is because I just read an article how climate change is starting to affect the species on the islands. Anyway, but I think that's a conversation for another day. But so outside of Machu Picchu, tell us, what's your advice to travelers, who are, coming down, to really give them the full experience of the countries, that type of thing?
Well, this is actually, it's like almost fighting against the wave, but it's to motivate them to actually think about taking their full 15-day vacation in the area, because There is so much to see. And if you rush it, you're going to miss on the small details. And those small details are probably the most enriching part of the trip. Now, beyond Machu Picchu in Peru, you have the Sacred Valley of the Incas and the small towns like Cusco, Ollantaytambo, and all these villages where there is also other Inca ruins. If travelers are active, they can do the Inca Trail. And if people are interested in wildlife, they can visit the Amazon rainforest. Now, you have to take in mind that on your way to Cusco, which is the city where the airport is, and where you'll actually have your flight arriving to then go onwards to Machu Picchu, you're going to have to go to Lima first. And Lima is one of the top culinary hubs in the world. So take some time to dine around, to visit the museums. They have the beautiful gold museum, which has all the relics from the Inca Empire and pre-Incan cultures. Then actually other areas in Peru are the Nazca lines. You have the desert in that area. You also the desert, actually, you have sand dunes that are actually taller than the dunes in the Sahara. And this is in South America and Peru. Exactly, without the extreme weather, and actually with a more easy access. So these are things that a lot of people say, oh, I didn't know that existed even, in South America. And that's looking at Peru alone. Then if you look into Ecuador, you have the Andean region where you have small villages like Otavalo, which is the largest handicraft market in South America. And you find a lot of hand-woven goods, handcrafted wood, leather, and all these different artisan crafts. And it's very interesting to people that are into culture and art, because you find people wearing their traditional attire on an everyday basis, and not for the sake of tourists, but because they have strong ties with their culture. You have the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador as well, and it's actually the easiest access to the Amazon in South America, because from the capital city, Quito, you actually could drive into the Amazon basin in a 3.5-hour drive. But, to make it even more interesting, along the way, you can stop at hot springs, cloud forts, and then finally the Amazon rainforest. And then throughout the Avenue of the Volcanoes, which is actually, pretty much the Pan-American highway that goes through Ecuador, because on both sides of the highway, you have snow-capped volcanoes rising and nature reserves that are mountain reserves, where you can actually visit mountain lakes and this different unique scenery, plus small villages where artisan work is taking place, and mainly live cultures. Now, if you combine that with Peru has archaeological ruins, and Ecuador has live culture. So you have, even between these two different countries in South America, you have a tremendous contrast. And then you can add in the Amazon, the coast, the beaches, which are much different than beaches in the Caribbean, because these are black sand beaches. And the main focus is wildlife and nature there.
Well, I'm hopping on a plane right now. Listen, Marcel, we're going to take a break for our sponsors and our advertisers. So we'll come back. I have a few other questions. I didn't realize there were so many things to do, obviously. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'm David Yakir. You're listening to Yak About Today. I'm here live from Quito, Ecuador, with Marcel Perkins from Latin Trails. We'll be right back. I want to take a moment to talk to you about New Vision Eye Center. For the last couple of years, they've been a sponsor of this show, and I couldn't be prouder. I've met so many people that have walked up to me and thanked me for recommending them. I hear all sorts of stories about how they've worked miracles. And as you know, I've been a patient of New Vision Eye Center for years. So when I say go see Dr. Minotti, Reinauer, Tate, and O'Brien, it's because I wouldn't trust my eyes to anyone else. And we are back. I'm David Yakir. You're listening to Yak About Today, and I've got Marcel Perkins live from Quito, Ecuador, and he's from Latin Trails, and he's giving us all the information we need to start booking trips down there. While I have you, Marcel, why don't you give the information how people can get a hold of you? I mean, do they go through other travel agents? Do they get a hold of you directly? Why don't you give us all the info?
Sure, no problem. Well, as I mentioned, most of our business comes through travel agents. So if you have a travel agent down the road that you're confident and knows your travel preference, that's going to be your first option. Now, otherwise, it's okay to contact us direct at www.latintrails.com. We also have a toll-free number from the United States, which is 1-800-747-0567. and one of our team members will take your request on traveling to Latin America. It could be Ecuador and Peru. These are our main destinations, but we do have partnerships with other operators in Colombia, in Chile, and Argentina if you wanted to do a longer trip. Now, you would let us know what your preferences are, how much time you have. Usually you're going to want to visit Galapagos and Machu Picchu. I would say that if you want to combine both in a trip, let it be no less than 12 days if those are the only two places you're visiting. Now, if you want to add a little bit more time and see a little bit more of Ecuador and Peru, I would think you should plan it in advance at least to 15 days. And let us know your preferences. You would send us an email with all these details. We have a central email address, which is travel@latintrails.com. And then from there, we will get back to you with a customized itinerary, which we can then get on the phone and talk about and go making small changes here and there. Now, the customization has no cost. What we would do, how we make an income is basically we work with most hotels and agents in organizing the services in Ecuador on a commission basis, which is the same commission that is given throughout the travel agents around the world. So what we would do is we would organize a trip based on your preferences. We're not attached to any specific product. We would organize it on your preferences and then add in the different experiences that you can enjoy throughout this journey. It could be a multi-generational trip, a honeymoon, or an anniversary.
All right. I have a question. I want to go back to the Galapagos, and I've been having a lot of trouble saying that, but we were always curious. This is one of the most special places on Earth. And there seems to be some question whether, they should stop tourism there, for conservation, to protect the islands, even though I'm hearing that, climate change is starting to affect the islands. So what is the general feeling, especially of the native population in the area, of all these tourists sort of descending on the islands? Maybe you can give me your thoughts on that.
Well, most everyone that lives on the islands depends on the tourism industry. Now, before there was the tourism industry, there was more commercial fishing in the islands, which, in my opinion, and the opinion of many scientists, is a lot more harmful for the islands. Now it's been limited, and actually, at this moment, if somebody wanted to start a tourism operation in the islands, they would have to turn in 2 local fishing permits to get a tourism permit for anything they want to do. Just to put this in summary. So it's actually a way of creating an economy for the islands that is a little bit more conservative than being, into even artisanal fishing. That for one part. On the other part, what people on the islands expect is people come on an organized trip. We don't want people showing up, on one of the airlines and then saying, okay, what can I do? Mainly because first, it's an unexpected guest on one part. And on the other part, then you are actually booking into side trips and not a main trip and trying to put things together. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for the Galapagos, for example, it does make sense. And finally, the last piece of advice, and this is not just for the Galapagos, but anywhere you go around the world, and it's a campaign I'm pushing, is wash your boots. Because the biggest threat you have to any destination, nature destination around the planet, is seeds that you carry on the soles of your shoes.
Wow, that's a new one for me, actually. Wow, that's interesting. I have a couple of questions that people have about traveling down south now. And it's a great concern. Everybody hears about the Zika virus and, how should people really think about this? Okay,
well, it is a present threat in all of the tropics mainly. Now, Ecuador is at the equator line, but if you think of it, Quito, the city where you're arriving, is 2,800 meters above sea level. Zika virus cannot survive above 1,200 meters, so it's not present in all of the Andes. It never made a big presence in Peru. And in the Galapagos Islands, which is completely isolated from mainland, there maybe was one Zika virus case, which was from somebody that was already infected before they got on the plane. So that's really what the statistics go down to. Now, I don't want to aim the finger at anybody, but it's like any epidemic; it could happen at any time. But most cases of Zika virus are not present in South America, but they're mainly in Florida, and well, if you count in Brazil too, but it's actually two different areas. Now, if you think of Brazil in terms of South America, we're talking about almost the same distance between California and New York.
Got it.
So
Marcel, because I got a time thing going on here. For the last question, and you have to do this quick, brag about the ships that go out to the Galapagos Islands.
Okay, well, the Sea Star Journey, which is our flagship, it has a space for 16 guests. You have 2 hot tubs on the main deck, 8 cabins only, all twin with ocean views. 4 cabins have balconies. You got to take into account that the chef is cooking for 16 people, so there's a lot of attention to detail, something you would not find on a bigger boat. And I think that's the biggest advantage, going on an intimate group, coming close to islands that are unique in a small group where you actually have close wildlife encounters without being intrusive.
All right, Marcel, I really appreciate you coming on, and I thank you. That's Marcel Perkins. He's from Latin Trails. Get in touch with him, and we hope we have you back. In fact, maybe I'll just come down there and record the show with you down there.
That would be amazing.
Okay. This is David Yakir. You're listening to Yak About Today, and that was Marcel Perkins from Latin Trails. All right, everybody. Goodbye. Talk to you next week. Peace.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak. Don't talk back. Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak. Don't talk back. Don't you give me no dirty looks. Your father simply knows the cooks. Tell all your hula friends outside, you ain't got time to take a ride. Yakety yak. Don't talk back.